Please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment where you are watching in the world. Okay, Reddit, so here goes. This date had all the makings of being my most successful in history. I mean, it started so well. What happened was a tragedy, a betrayal of my senses. A kiss so bad it made me question my judgment, my standards. And the worst part, he had no idea. His name was Ethan. Ethan was one of those rare good matches you find on dating apps. Like finding a $20 bill in your coat pocket just when you're about to cry over rent. His pics were a mix of look at me hiking, and here's my dog, which is basically the holy grail of online dating. We'd been texting for a couple of weeks, and to be honest with you all, I was impressed. He wasn't one of those guys who just sends, "What you up to?" at 11 p.m. or drops random emojis like a toddler who got a hold of a phone. Ethan had substance. He asked me thoughtful questions, remembered things I'd said, and even sent me a Spotify playlist of songs he thought I'd like. Yes, I listened. Yes, it was good. Yes, I started imagining us as the main characters in a rom-com montage. So when he asked me out, I was thrilled. Like, text all my friends and stress over what to wear, thrilled. He suggested grabbing drinks at this little cocktail bar downtown, which I loved because it was casual but still classy. No pressure, just vibes. Perfect. The date started off like a dream. Ethan was on time, which, let's be honest, already set him apart from 90% of the guys I've dated. He looked even better in person, tall, well-dressed, and rocking this effortless, slightly scruffy look that screamed, "I don't try too hard, but I care." He smiled when he saw me, and I swear, my knees went a little weak. Okay, maybe that was the heels, but still. We found a cozy booth in the corner, and from the moment we sat down, the conversation just clicked. You know when you meet someone, and it feels like you've known them forever? That's what it was like. We talked about everything, our favorite shows, embarrassing childhood stories, even how we both secretly hate brunch culture, but still go for the mimosas. He was funny, charming, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. Every time he laughed, I felt like I was winning at life. The drinks were great too. I had some fancy gin cocktail with a name I couldn't pronounce, and he ordered an old-fashioned because of course he did. We even shared an appetizer because, as he put it, what kind of monster doesn't order fries on a date? A man after my own heart. By the time we finished our second round, I was already mentally planning how I'd tell my friends about him. Guys, he's funny, he's hot, and he didn't once mention Joe Rogan. I think I found a unicorn. After a couple of hours, Ethan suggested heading back to his place for a nightcap. And honestly, I was all in. The chemistry was there, the mood was perfect, and I was feeling bold thanks gin. Plus, his place was walking distance, so it felt casual and not like a let's go back to my creepy apartment in the middle of nowhere situation. I grabbed my coat, and we set off into the night. The walk to his apartment was just as great as the rest of the date. He kept cracking jokes, and I was laughing so hard I almost tripped on the sidewalk. At one point, he made some comment about how cold it was and casually put his arm around me. Smooth, right? I was swooning. I'm pretty sure I texted my friend something along the lines of, "If I don't marry this man, it's because I was hit by a bus first." We get to his place, and it's actually really nice. Like suspiciously nice for a single guy in his 30s. It was clean, no suspicious smells or random piles of laundry, tastefully decorated, and had actual plants that were alive. He even had one of those fancy coffee table books about architecture or something. At this point, I was convinced Ethan was some kind of dating unicorn sent to me by the universe to restore my faith in humanity. We sat on his couch, sipping wine and talking about music. He put on this playlist, probably the same one he'd sent me earlier, and it was the perfect mix of chill and romantic. The lighting was soft, the mood was perfect, and I was sitting there thinking, this is it. This is the kind of date people write songs about. And then it happened. The moment. The kiss moment. You know the one. He leaned in, I leaned in, and everything slowed down. I was ready for fireworks, butterflies, all of it. This was going to be the kiss that sealed the deal, the kiss that made me text my friends. Guys, he's IT. And then his breath hit me. It was like a wall of something so foul, so tragic, that I almost recoiled on instinct. I'm not being dramatic when I say it could have been classified as a biological weapon. It was a mix of stale alcohol, garlic, and something I can only describe as regret. My brain went into full panic mode. Abort mission. Abort. But it was too late. We kissed. And by kissed, I mean his breath assaulted my senses while I desperately tried not to gag. I couldn't focus on anything except the smell. I don't even know if his lips were soft or if he was good at kissing, because all I could think about was the fact that my nose was dying. It was like someone had lit a dumpster fire and then shoved my face into it. When it was over, which felt like an eternity but was probably 5 seconds, I pulled back and tried to play it cool. "Wow," I said, which was the first word that came to mind and also the most neutral thing I could think of. He smiled, clearly thinking the kiss had gone well, while I was sitting there wondering if I'd survive the night. He leaned in for another kiss, and I panicked. Hard. My brain was screaming, "You can't do this again, Naomi. You barely made it out alive last time." So I did what any self-respecting woman would do. I faked a yawn. "Wow, I'm so tired," I said, even though I'd just downed a glass of wine and was wide awake. "I should probably get going." He looked a little disappointed, but didn't argue. He walked me to the door, and as I was leaving, he said, "We should do this again sometime." I smiled and nodded, knowing full well there was no way I was putting myself through that again. When I got home, I immediately texted my friends. So I just kissed a guy whose breath could kill a small animal. What do I do? The replies were instant. "OMG no. Why didn't you run? Naomi, you deserve better." One friend suggested I gift him a toothbrush if we ever went on a second date, which, honestly, was hilarious but also tragic because, yeah, no second date. Look, Ethan was great. He really was. But the breath thing? I just couldn't get past it. Hygiene is important, people. If you're planning to kiss someone, maybe do a quick breath check first. Pop a mint, chew some gum, something. Because bad breath? That's a deal breaker. I'm a young 24-year-old whose job allows for a lot of free time, especially for casual dating. I often have hookups with most of them lasting for a few weeks, or occasionally a few months if the vibe is right. So when I matched with this super cute girl on Tinder, we'll just call her Claire, not her real name, and we decided to finally hook up after a few days of flirting, I thought it would just be a normal in and out kind of situation with the slim chance of it becoming more. On our first date, Claire and I grabbed drinks, and we instantly hit it off. After about 45 minutes of laughing and getting flirty, we head back to my place, where it only took seconds to jump into my bed. While making out, dirty words were exchanged, and I was slowly figuring out just how kinky Claire was. It was fun, lighthearted, and we were both enjoying getting our engines started. But just as this subreddit suggests, this story has to go bad somewhere. Well guys, here it is. During foreplay, she pauses and, in my defense, with the most sexually suggestive voice ever, utters, "If you were to slap me." And without any hesitation, I right-hand smack Claire directly in the face with the force of Thor. Pause. I know what you're thinking. Coffee Escher, you're an idiot. And you're absolutely right, because Claire quickly, and with a lot of frustration in her voice, finished her sentence like this. "If you were to smack me, it would bring back a lot of terrible memories of when I was in an abusive relationship in which my ex smacked me a lot, so please don't do that again." I instantly gasp, and for the next 20 seconds I continued to word vomit apologies to Claire in an attempt to justify why I did what I just did. I explained how I thought she was asking to be smacked, and how I completely misunderstood the tone of her voice. She turns to me and, realizing how this miscommunication happened, smiles, and explains how she only used that tone of voice because she didn't want to kill the mood by sounding too serious. After realizing the miscommunication error and laughing a little about it, we push it out of our minds and end up having a great night of sex and movies. But unfortunately for us, this was only the beginning of our dating hell. A few days later, and with the awful thought of that smack still in my mind, I reached out to Claire and suggested we hang out again. This was late afternoon, and Claire said she only had a little time before her dinner plans, and so I smoothly and confidently suggested a quickie. Why not? She enthusiastically says yes, and about 15 minutes later, I'm leading her up to my room for round 2. All I could think of in my head was one word: redemption. I needed to make up for the last time by making sure I blew her mind this time. I planned on giving her a minimum of 15 minutes of foreplay to make sure she was in the right mind to have an orgasm. Things were going smooth, and after some intense foreplay we start fucking. I get on top. We start making out. Things start to intensify, and our kissing is getting rougher and more kinky, when all of a sudden I decided to raise my head a bit to look at her face. Pure horror came over me as I quickly realized what had just happened. During kissing, somehow my nose started to bleed. And not only that, but Claire's face was completely covered in my blood. I jump from my bed freaking out until Claire realized what happened as well. We both start freaking out. I give Claire my towel, and we wipe the blood off her face while the entire time I'm word vomiting apologies all over again. She explains how it's fine, and that nosebleeds happen all the time. I jokingly, but with all seriousness, suggest that if anyone in the history of mankind has a past to ghost someone, it's her. We laugh, but she interrupts by saying that she has to go to dinner. So with my tail in between my legs and my embarrassment at an all-time high, I drop her off at home. I swore I would never see her again. About a week rolls by, and I'm posting on my Snapchat story when I realize that she's responding to a lot of them. Mostly small talk or laughing emojis, but still responses. I start asking myself, does this girl still want to be friends? After all of this? There's no way. But lo and behold, after a few days of acting like everything is okay, Claire asks me if I want to come over to watch a movie. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that she was still down to hang out after I literally painted her face with my bloody nose. I laughed at myself and thought, there's no way I can fuck up a third time. But oh buddy, was I wrong. We get to her house and start watching our movie, Talladega Nights. A classic. I told her how I love Will Ferrell and how his movies are fucking hilarious when you're baked. She says, oh really? That's funny because I have a little weed left if you want to smoke. Guys, 10 minutes later, and I'm literally redder than the devil's dick. I don't often smoke, and so my tolerance is almost non-existent. I quickly realize I'm way too high for my own good. Previous bad experiences with marijuana has taught me that overthinking is never the best option. So I try to relax, play it cool, and what do you know? It works. Halfway through the movie, she climbs on top of me, and we start kissing until she asks me if I want to go into her room. I say yes, and we start going at it. Not going to lie, being high made it 10x better. After thoroughly getting my brains fucked out, we finally lay down with heavy breathing and small chuckles. Even high I was still excited we finally had a normal hookup. After a few seconds I ask to grab some water, and so she gives me directions to her fridge. I start to get up when a familiar but completely unexpected sensation hits me. The fucking spins. I was confused. I didn't drink anything. I only smoked weed, which is ironically often prescribed to prevent nausea. I barely made it to the fridge when I knew I was past the point of no return. I call out to Claire and utter, hey, this is honestly so embarrassing to say, but I'm pretty sure I'm about to throw up. She walks out as I begin to hurl my Chipotle from earlier all into her trash can. All I can hear her say is, oh. She grabs me a wet paper towel so I can wipe my face and directs me to the bathroom. I begin, for the third time in a month, to word vomit apologies to Claire. Pun intended. She tells me it's all okay, and even asked if I needed anything to make me feel better. In complete defeat, I said no thank you. I decided to take out her trash, which is the least I could have done considering my dinner was all in it. She walks me out, gives me a hug, and we say our goodbyes. It's been a whole 2 days since that last situation, and guess what, guys? So look, I'm going to confess something. I've met people off the internet. I'm not talking about trawling through the online yellow pages and phoning up Steve from Custom Plumbing and then acting all, oh, you're the guy off the internet, when he turns up at my house to fix a leaky pipe here. I'm talking about meeting people. You know, for a relationship. Sheesh, this is awkward. Online dating? Otherwise known as the lucky dip. Now I know in 2010 that this isn't an earth-shattering revelation, but back in 2002 it was groundbreaking. In a way I was a pioneer. A very desperate pioneer. Not as desperate as some it turns out. And that, dear friends, is what this blog is about. Desperation. Clingy, stocky desperation. Her name was Helen, and she was a nurse. She also looked, according to the grainy picture she sent me, surprisingly normal. She messaged me out of the blue from a dating website I had joined, which I found a bit odd. I have never been messaged by a woman on one of these sites before. Men? Yes. Creepy men who wanted to know how sweaty I got after a run, and if I'd mind telling them where I lived. Oh yes, there are plenty of weirdos on the internet. Following on from her message, things moved quickly. Below is what happened during the week we met. Wednesday night, I get a message from Helen saying I looked cute. Immediately think one of my mates is trying to pull my leg here, but I play along. I've never been called cute. Interesting? Yes. Leery? Often. But never cute. Helen seems normal if a little giggly. She must be nervous. We email back and forth, and then chat on MSN. It all seems to be going quite nicely. Thursday morning, I wake up to find about 3 emails from Helen in my inbox. Okay, that's a little weird, but she did say she was getting stuck into the vino. We've all done that. I jot down a few terms that jumped out at me from one of her emails, so I can have a think about them later. They are iridescent, longing, relationship, and possessive. I will look at these words at lunch if I get the chance. Thursday lunch. I forget to think about the words from her email due to a rather terrific sandwich. It had 3 kinds of meat on it and types of lettuce I thought were weeds. I get a text message and an email from Helen. No issues here except I can't remember giving her my phone number. Alarm bells are dormant at this stage. Thursday night, we talk on the phone. I say talk, but that was mainly Helen. I nodded a lot and laughed in the right places. She seems nice. We've decided to meet each other in real life tomorrow night. This will be awkward. I can't decide which t-shirt to wear. I decide on the black one. I have a tendency to spray food around like a performing seal when I eat, so black will work out well. I sure hope she's wearing black. Friday lunch. Sandwich not as good as I remember, but it tasted okay as I read the 4 emails from Helen telling me how much she is looking forward to meeting me. She says she'll pick me up at 7 p.m. at my house. How nice of her. Friday night. It is 6 p.m. and I hear a car pull up outside. I peer out the window and see that it is Helen. She's an hour early. There's a small insistent voice in my head that keeps telling me this is a little weird. I ignore it as Helen is wearing a short dress. I invite her in and excuse myself so I can shower. While soaping up, I come to the realization that I didn't actually tell Helen where I lived. The small insistent voice in my head starts sniggering and telling me, "I told you so." I walk out of the shower and see Helen at my computer. Just having a look, she tells me, "Right. Knock yourself out." We go to dinner at a nice little cafe. The food is rather good, and I am getting a little drunk. Helen asks if I want to go back to her place. My brain says no, but my genitals say yes. Things are done. I won't go into detail other than to say I was happy with my performance. I note that Helen has quite a lot of teddy bears in her unit. Helen says, "Oh, I just love teddy bears." Okay. I catch a cab home as I don't want to outstay my welcome. Helen says it isn't a problem, but I don't want to give too much to this girl. Keep them wanting more. Saturday morning, I wake up to my phone beeping. I have a text message from Helen. She says thanks for the wonderful night, and she hopes I'm not too hungover. I stumble out of bed and have a shower. My shower is interrupted by a phone call. It's Helen. She wants to know if I want to go to a barbecue later that day. I said sure, that sounds wonderful. As I hang up the phone, I start to wonder why I said that. Helen is coming at 1 p.m. It is 10 a.m. now, so she'll be here any minute. Saturday afternoon. We are at the barbecue. The food is nice, and there is plenty of beer. It is also Helen's family reunion. Awesome. I am being introduced as her new boyfriend. I grin like the Cheshire Cat, and at one stage it feels my face will split in half. Her mother corners me and asks me when I think we'll be having kids. I don't know what to say to this, so I nod and smile and say something about it being a little early on for that sort of talk. Her mom says she'll chat to me later. Just awesome. I need to get out of here, so I complain of a migraine and ask Helen to drive me home. She's a little annoyed at this because we haven't played Pictionary yet, and she was certain I would be a good match for her Uncle Gary. Never been beaten apparently. But she takes me home. I say goodbye, which takes a good 10 minutes as I try and persuade her from tending to my headache. I'm looking forward to a good night's sleep. Saturday night. I've had 8 messages from Helen so far. 8. 3 phone calls too. Only 1 email though. Sunday morning. I wake up to a text message from Helen asking me, "What are we doing today?" I reply, "I'm helping a friend move, and then he's taking me to a movie." I get silence for a good hour or so, and then a message telling me to get fucked, and to jump off a fucking bridge. I immediately get another message from her apologizing for her actions, and that she hopes I have a good time with my mates. Sunday night. I tell my mates what has happened over a beer or 2. They stare in stunned silence at me. I tell them she's a nice girl though. One of them makes stabbing motions and laughs at me. Oh, my friends are funny jokesters. We enjoy the movie. It had zombies in it, and zombies are pretty much fucking ace. I turn my phone back on, and I see I have missed 7 phone calls from Helen. Does she not know about the policy of turning phones off in movies? I wonder what she wanted, but then realize the 14 new messages from her on my phone will probably give me an insight. They range from, "I hope you're having a great time, babe," to "You fucking arsehole. You're with another girl, aren't you?" I decide that Helen and I are done. I get home and tuck myself into bed. At 2 a.m. I get a message. I wearily roll over and grab my phone. The message reads, Andrew, we need to talk. I know you are in there. I am watching you sleep. Oh fuck. My first thought was fuck, and my next was I need some sort of weapon. I look out through the window, and there she is, standing in my garden bed like some sort of loon. She beckons to me. I shake my head and say out the window, no Helen. We'll talk about this in the morning. She howls like a banshee when she hears this. I shut the window, make sure the front door is locked, and turn off my phone. I try and get back to sleep, but I hear some banging on the front door, and some weird scrabbling that I hope to fucking Jesus is a possum trying to get in the back door. I don't sleep much. At 4 a.m. I get up and look out the window. Helen is still there, frantically writing on a pad of paper. She's been there all night long. I wait for another hour or so until I hear her leave, her car squealing like a kicked cat up the street. I open the door and written all over my front step are the words fuckhead and cheating bastard in black pen. Also on my front step is about 15 pages of handwritten scrawl. Helen's thoughts on the whole incident. I try reading them, but get a bit scared after she threatens to slice my penis off on page 4. I file these pages away to read at a later date, but we all know the true reason. Evidence. If I was to disappear, at least someone might find out what really happened. I don't know what became of Helen. I got a couple more emails from her, but they were barely legible. Basically, she'd gotten into her mind, in the 5 days that we got to know each other, that I was the one, the man of her dreams. I once thought I saw her mother in a shopping center, and I spent a couple of very nervous minutes looking like a creepy dude as I hid behind some clothing racks in a Just Jeans store. I was wary for a good couple of months after that. I sure hope she's happy, and in another country. In some sort of institution would be nice. So a few years ago I was dumped after 1 year, so my ex could get back with his ex. So naturally I immediately Tinder, Bumble / OkCupid immediately. I started getting messages instantly from this guy with really cute pictures on OkCupid. We can call him S. At this time also I worked at a popular drugstore chain and was a manager, so that meant I worked 5-6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. And if we had a call off, which was always, I would have to come in on my days off. So it was taking a while to meet S, but he was being completely understanding about my crazy schedule, which I was happy about, as most guys would stop talking to me once I couldn't arrange a meet-up. So I finally get a day off after working about a month in a row. I had previously made plans with my best friend to get dinner. S asked if maybe we could meet up after that, and I told him if it wasn't too late, then it was a possibility. So I asked my best friend if we could have an early dinner, and she was down, so I texted S and said we were on for 8. So around 5 I meet my best friend, and we catch up. The whole time I was with her, though, S was already starting to blow up my phone. Initially it was sweet, as he was saying he was excited to finally meet me. Then he started asking if I was done yet, because he was ready to go out at that moment. When I didn't respond immediately, he started texting me asking if I was ghosting him now that we had made plans. I texted back that it was only 6 and we had plans for 8, but I'd try to finish up. I showed my best friend his texts, and she told me to just tell him no because he was starting to act crazy. I had really enjoyed texting with S, and since I love red flags I ended dinner and went out to meet S. We arranged to meet at a local arcade that I love spending time at. So I get there around 7:30 and let S know I'm walking into the arcade and was going to get some quarters. So this arcade is downtown in my city, so you have to walk down these stairs into almost like a basement. As I'm walking down the stairs, I see someone who looks vaguely familiar, but can't place him. He starts walking towards me, and that's when I realize it's S. He is almost glaring at me and blurted out, "You're finally here. I've been waiting for almost 2 hours." I was really confused as I had clearly told him 8 multiple times, and it wasn't even 8. But whatever, I told him I was sorry and that I was ready to get to some games. I'm going to take this moment to say the man standing in front of me looked very different than his pictures. The pictures he had on his profile must have been 5+ years old. He had his hair all spiked up like some Jersey Shore guy and was wearing a white undershirt tank top thing and some gray sweats. He has also told me he was 5 feet 11 inches, but since I'm only 5 feet 2 inches and could look him straight in the eyes, that was definitely a lie. So I've spent a lot of time in this arcade, so I was pretty good at a couple of the games I really liked, so I beat him a few times on House of Dead and Soul Calibur, to which he was getting a little bent of shape. He made the comment girls shouldn't be this good at video games, and I was just like, okay. So we had previously talked about how I hate playing pool because I can't get a hang of it, and I also just get bored with it easily. So he spots the pool tables, and was like, hey, so let me teach you how to play pool. Since I knew he was put out being beat at the games, I was like, fine, we can do one game. So as he's trying to help my hopeless self, he keeps putting his hand on my waist, and was leaning in way too close for comfort. So after 4 games, I'm miserable. I happened to get a text from a friend, V, who's down the street at a bar. He saw I was downtown on Snapchat, and told me I should come say hi. V is a guy, but we've known each other since high school. I also dated his best friend, who killed himself a few years previously, so it's a completely platonic relationship. So since I'm miserable, as I asked S if he's like to stop by and just grab one drink. He says yes, then makes the comment he wants to see the kind of people I hang out with. Again, I was just like, okay. So we head over to the bar, and V is there with about 4 or 5 other guys who I happen to be acquaintant with. So we are having a good time just talking and taking shots, and I keep asking S if he wants to leave, and he says no, he's fine. So at one point I go to the bathroom, and when I come out, one of the guys, T, tells me S is asking all them if they've slept with me, and V is about at punch because he's being so rude. So I gather up S and start making our way out the door. At this point, S pulls out his phone and opens Pokemon Go. This was the summer it had first come out, so I knew it was the fad. We decide to walk about the college campus that's integrated in the downtown area. I keep trying to make conversation, but he has his phone in front of his face and is only giving me one-word answers. We get to the law school area, and he says there is a gym here, so we sit down and he does his thing, the whole time not saying a word to me. So at this point it's 11:30, and I was living about 35 minutes from downtown at the time. So I tell S I'm calling it a night as I work at 6 the next morning. He immediately jumps up and says he'll walk me to my car. So at this point I'm feeling like we both are mutually not feeling each other. When we get to my car, he asks if I want to come over to his place and watch a movie and winks at me. Straight face, so I'm like, no, I have to be up in less than 6 hours for a long day at work. He calls me lame and then walks away. So I get in my car and drive away. So I don't text and drive. I'm a crap driver, as is so not adding that into the equation. So after my 35-minute drive, I pull into my driveway and check my phone as it's been buzzing. S sent me the following texts. I really would like you to come over. I wanted to kiss you goodnight but was too nervous. I just wanted to cuddle up with you because I thought you're so cute. So what, are you like going to another guy's house? You're not going to answer? I know you lied about not texting and driving as I saw you on your phone after I walked away. Whatever, you seem like a whore anyways. So I text back, I'm home. I think it's best if we don't continue seeing each other. Good night. Fast forward a few months, he sends me a Facebook message saying, hey, do you have any cute, short friends you could send my way since you don't talk to me anymore? I chose not to respond. To this day, every few months I'll get a random text or Facebook message or a message on a dating app asking to go out again. And when I don't respond or say I'm not interested, he goes on a rant about what a party girl whore I am. So in conclusion, not the worst date and also not my finest moment in dating, but every time I think about that night I cringe a little. Reluctantly, I had made an online dating profile with the eager prodding of my friends hovering at my back, convincing me it would make me feel better after getting out of a 3-year relationship. I was very selective with who I chose to talk to, but one very handsome, intelligent man drew my attention right away. He was sweet and kind and eager to meet me. He invited me for drinks, and then a play followed by dinner. The day sounded perfect. He planned it for the upcoming weekend, and I agreed. It was decided I would meet him at the playhouse, and we would have drinks at the bar inside. I arrived promptly at the set time and waited around for him. Strike one. I texted with no answer for close to 15 minutes, where at this point, I was almost ready to go see a couple friends who were having dinner and drinks at a bar a couple blocks over. He texts me saying he's almost there, so I say to myself, hey, I'll forgive this misdemeanor. He arrives, but I don't recognize him at first because he looks absolutely nothing like his photos. He comes up to me, which startles me, and just grabs me in a bear hug. I gently push away this giant man. He's 6 feet 5 inches, and I'm a slight 5 feet 4 inches. Already he's intimidating me. He's giant and large in general, nothing like his toned photos would suggest. I'm someone who focuses more on personality, so I breath and say okay. I tell myself to carry on. He starts babbling, not once apologizing for keeping me waiting. He suddenly stops, glares and says, can you move your purse to the other side so I can hold your hand? I'm baffled and my jaw drops, but I do so because I don't know how to respond. We carry on walking towards the bar, and he pulls out this little envelope and gives it to me with a grunt. "I got this for you." Again I'm taken aback, but take it and open it. Within are a tiger's eye necklace, bracelet, and earrings. Beautiful but uncomfortable for me to receive on a first date with someone I've not even met before. I say thank you and gently tuck them into my purse. 5 minutes later we're sitting at the bar, and he glares at me again and says, "You're not wearing the jewelry." I cringe and put the necklace and bracelet on begrudgingly. At this point I'm beyond uncomfortable, and am just doing this to placate him. He orders himself a triple something or other from the bar, and I order just a water. I'm not big on drinking, or being around people who drink a lot around me. I explain this to him, and he nods before pounding back his drink and ordering another. At this point it's time to start heading to our seats for the play, so he pounds back his second drink, pays, and then starts guiding me with his hand on the back of my neck. I feel like a little child or a dog, and he gives me shivers the way he's touching me. When we're seated and the lights dim, he immediately pushes my dress up to expose my thighs and starts rubbing and stroking them. At this point I've had enough. I grab his hand and move it back in his own lap, saying a firm, and oh, I kid you not, less than 15 minutes later it's back in the exact same spot. I repeat the motions, but this time put my purse in my lap. He keeps his hands to himself until intermission, where at this point, he guides me by my neck again to where he pounds another 2 drinks back within 15 minutes. I play around on my phone texting one of my guy friends to come pick me up, because at this point this man is really intimidating me. I say I need to go to the washroom, and he says he needs to as well, and follows me down the hallway. The next thing I know my back's against the wall, and he's grabbing my ass and trying to kiss me. I say no as forcefully as I can, and try to give him a bit of a push. He's honestly probably got a good 150 pounds on me, so he doesn't budge. I say move, and surprisingly he does. At this point he just grabs my hand like nothing happened, and starts asking me if I would like to come to his cabin for a week with him in a couple weeks. I timidly say I'm busy, and I just feel sick right now, and would like to go home. I tell him I have someone picking me up, and I should wait outside. His hand tightens painfully around mine, but I just cringe and wrestle it away. As soon as I'm in the safe haven of my friend's car, I let out a half sob, half laugh, and rip the jewelry off of "Never again," I vowed. For the next week straight I had countless texts a day, and at least one FaceTime or phone call he would attempt. This was by far the worst dating experience of my life. This happened around 10-ish years ago. I began talking online with a woman. I'll call her Helga for no reason other than that I've always wanted to meet a Helga, on OkCupid, and she seemed like a pretty cool person. I learned she was wheelchair bound, but I figured, so what? She asked me to order her a glass of wine on our date, and I was all sure. We arranged to meet at a popular, mid-range, chain restaurant near her, and she asked that I wait outside for her to arrive because she doesn't drive and has special transportation. On the day of the date, I arrived about 15 minutes early, and there wasn't much parking, so I had to park somewhat far from the restaurant. I walked over and sat on a bench to wait. After about 10 minutes a large shuttle van pulled up, and the driver yelled out the window, "You Soli?" I cautiously replied with a yeah. He confirmed with an okay, and got out of the van, walked around the vehicle while a ramp on its midsection slowly and loudly ground open. I wasn't at all sure what to do, or what the etiquette was for this situation, but I slowly started approaching the ramp. The driver walked up the incline, began removing what looked like 7 parachutes worth of straps from Helga and her wheelchair, and then wheeled her down to me. This is when I realized she left a bit out when she and I talked online. While I knew she was wheelchair bound, she didn't divulge that she had very little bodily autonomy, as well as several other factors that I'll explain as they become relevant. I greeted Helga and asked how she was, and the usual small talk. The van driver yelled that he'll be back in 2 hours and left. Then I wheeled her into the restaurant, as her wheelchair wasn't able to be moved under the occupant's power. That is, the wheelchair wasn't motorized, nor did it have anywhere to grip the wheels. I mention this because as a result I had to pathetically and clumsily maneuver the both of us through the restaurant's large double doors, preferably without letting a door hit Helga or her chair. All the while a family stared blankly at us, and oh so kindly did nothing to help. Throughout the awkward attempt to enter a building, Helga said absolutely nothing. But hey, we made it in, smooth sailing from here on, right? The restaurant's greeter welcomed us, and escorted us to a table that was located fairly central to the dining area. this is relevant. The greeter removed one of the table's chairs, and I pushed Helga into place and awkwardly tried to help her take her coat and gloves off. Helga didn't touch the menu, so I asked if I could help at all. She didn't reply or even acknowledge that I spoke. After an awkward pause, I opened my menu and started looking through it. I should say I am one of those people who easily gets analysis paralysis, and I take an annoyingly long time to decide most anything. Anyway, while I was browsing the menu, I noticed Helga staring at me, the pressure from which added to my indecisiveness. The server came by and asked if we'd like a drink to start out with. Helga abruptly and loudly exclaimed, "I want the chicken Caesar salad." This caught me off guard. Rattled, I ordered some type of salad and soda water. That's when I remembered she wanted me to get her a glass of wine. I asked Helga which wine she'd like, but she didn't respond. So I ordered the first one listed. I know nothing about wine selection. The server told us she will be right back with our drinks, and as she walked away she gave me this "I'm so sorry" look. Helga began asking me a few questions. Stuff about school and jobs and interests. I answered and she nodded along. The thing is, nearly every question I asked her went completely ignored. I was completely at a loss on what to do. Helga told me she needed to call her mom and let her know that I showed up and that she was safe. She took out her mom's phone, she didn't have one of her own, and began attempting to dial it. With her limited coordination, though, the process of dialing continued for at least a minute. All the while I was asking her if I could help her dial for her, while holding up my cell phone and frantically gesturing towards it. I was ignored again, but thankfully she managed to get a hold of her mom and talked to her for maybe 20 seconds. Our drinks and food arrived, and I noticed that Helga is struggling to grasp the narrow stem of the wine flute. I asked Helga if she would like a different cup for her wine, but she didn't reply. About 10 seconds of her struggling went by, then she asked me to ask the server for a different cup. I called over the server when she next passed by and requested a children's cup and a straw. My thinking was that if she does knock it over, at least there won't be any glass shards to worry about. Again, as the server walked away, she gave me a look similar to what someone might give a puppy that they want to adopt but just aren't able to at the time. Once our meals arrived, I felt relieved to have something to distract from the awkwardness. While crunching away at some former foliage, I looked up from my plate and noticed Helga maneuvering her fork over her salad much the same way as one of those coin-operated prize games with the claw that hovers above a bunch of cheap crap before being lowered to a selected target, which, in this case, is salad greens. I totally understood that this method of fork handling was the result of her poor coordination, but that didn't make it any less surreal. Helga began asking me a series of personal questions. I believe she was trying to assess my intentions. Still, though, she wouldn't acknowledge anything I asked. As I attempted to engage her in this conversation, I also had to consciously force myself to eat as slowly as possible, because I didn't want to finish my salad 30 minutes before she did. Then it happened. Well, the first of a series of it's happened. First, though, let me restate that our table was pretty central in the room. Additionally, Helga had little control over the volume of her voice, at least that is how it seemed. She loudly proclaimed something along the lines of, "I'm hoping to find someone to get me pregnant, and if my mom and I like you, you could be the one to do that." I was completely unprepared for that statement, and all I could do was nervously dart my eyes around the room. I noticed I wasn't alone in being shocked into silence. It felt like the whole of the room was suddenly honed in on the two of us, with looks of nervous disbelief and judgment. I remember the many faces in the room giving Helga and me their undivided attention, far more vividly than I remember my own response to her. I am pretty sure I awkwardly chuckled and went back to my salad. That moment felt longer than the date itself. After about an hour passed, Helga finally finished her salad. I briefly excused myself to the restroom to splash water on my face and collect myself. I returned to the table, paid, and asked Helga if there was anywhere nearby she wanted to go. She didn't respond. After pointlessly repeating myself a few times, I gave up and walked over to her to help her put her gloves and coat on. TJNK over went the wine cup as Helga's arm lifted to go in her coat sleeve. I kid you not, the wine spilled nowhere, except on her lap. "Shit," I thought, as I grabbed the cup as quickly as I could so that it wouldn't completely empty onto her. "It's okay," I said in what I imagine was a completely non-reassuring, panicky tone. My gaze darting about looking for some sort of solution, I saw a stack of napkins, grabbed them, and began patting her lap dry in the most non-provocative way I could. Using thick wads of napkins, staring off into the middle distance and being completely silent. This, of all possible moments, is when her mother entered the restaurant and walked over to us. I nearly shat myself. Surprisingly, her mother was completely understanding. Also surprisingly, her mother began talking to me as though Helga wasn't present. Wow, most guys have left by now. Some who stay are just hoping for sex. You know you can leave if you want. It's really okay. I assured her I wasn't after sex, which was true, and said I was having a nice time, which was so untrue. I wanted to leave so badly, but I felt horrible for her and didn't want to ditch her like everyone else apparently did. For the 20-ish minutes remaining before her van would come to pick her up, I wheeled her around Barnes and Noble. It was horrible because I kept asking what books, movies, and music she liked so I could bring her to those sections. But she never replied to me, and I felt as though I was imposing my will on her by having complete agency over what she could look at in the store. Finally, it was time to head back so she could get her van. I pushed Helga in her wheelchair back to the restaurant, while her mom tagged along. Helga asked me where I parked, and I explained that I parked somewhat far away because the lot was full. Helga's mom insisted that there wasn't time to go see my car, and Helga began screaming, "I want to see his car. I want to see it. Let me see it." I didn't know what to do. Her mom took the wheelchair out of my hands and told me to go on home. For the whole of the hour drive home, I sat in complete silence, my brain replaying parts of the date in an attempt to process the events of the last 2 hours. The following day I got a message from Helga thanking me for the date and asking for a second one. I asked her why she ignored nearly everything I asked her. Apparently she was hard of hearing and just never told me. I declined the offer for a second date as gently as I could. On the bright side, I guess I was so much more relaxed for every date I had since then, even the one where my date got arrested. After all, how could a date possibly go worse? I was in my first real relationship at 26. I was overweight and lacked confidence my entire life, but I had lost weight and found a girl who liked me. We had been dating for almost 6 months. She was hot, but she had issues. For times she had blacked out while drinking and become a total bitch. She was also on antidepressants, which she was bad at taking. She wasn't super affectionate when sober, and she was too reliant on her parents. Oh, and she may have occasionally puked up dinner. This is the story of her 5th blackout. I had already told her if it happened again, we were done, but this one took the cake. It was restaurant week, so we went to dinner at a nice Asian restaurant. It was normal for me to spend way too much money with this girl, but that was another issue. We have a decent dinner and a few drinks. We decide to meet my friends at a bar that is close. Her friend has a birthday party the next afternoon at a bar where there is a drinking contest, so we decide to take the night easy. At the bar my friends are at, there is a special on a 10% beer. The first thing my GF does is order one. I remind her that we have a long day tomorrow, and that it's strong. 15 minutes later she orders another. She is clearly getting drunk. My friends mention the bar they are spending the night at, and she already wants to go. So much for an easy night. Another beer for her. I am getting angry. After telling her to slow down, I go outside to cool off. It's about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. My friends can tell I am getting angry. She orders another beer. She is wasted. My friends decide to help me out and decide they are going to the other bar and we should head home. She demands going with them. She stands up and falls down. I help her with her coat as they leave. While waiting for a cab outside, I tell her that if we don't go home, we are over. She says she doesn't care. We get in our cab. I tell the cabbie her address. She screams that she wants to go to the bar, and the cabbie listens to her. When we arrive at the bar, she stumbles across the street. I motion to the bouncers to not let her in. She also almost bites it while walking. For the first 15 minutes, I try with the bouncers to tell her to go home. Eventually, I just go to the smoking area and talk to random people. I try to call her brother to get him to talk sense into her, but he doesn't answer. Now 45 minutes into this, and still outside, and after multiple attempts by her to run past the bouncers, they literally pick her up and throw her in a cab. I get in and tell him her address. Now you may ask why I have not left yet. Well, if she got in somehow, it was my friend's issue to deal with her, and I didn't want that to happen. Also, I was worried for her safety. At this point, I am 80% breaking up with her. About a mile and a half down the road, she starts screaming that she wants to go back to the bar. I try to calm her down, but the cabbie won't deal with it. We get kicked out. She proceeds to walk in the freezing weather the mile and a half back to the bar. She almost gets hit by a few cars along the way. When we get to the bar, the bouncers are pissed. I ask if they are calling the cops, to which they shake their heads yes. I ask for 5 minutes and call her mother at 1 a.m. Her mother answers and I explain. She was not shocked, which was odd. Then her mother talks to her and she listens. We get in a taxi and head to her place. I am 90% breaking up with her. On the taxi ride back, she gets pissed I called her mother. At this point, it's worth mentioning I was in a brace due to surgery on my arm. She leans over and starts punching me in the face, a total of 6 times. I am shocked, but finally throw her into the other side of the taxi. She stops. I am 100% breaking up with her. I tell her that we are over for good and there is no coming back. She cries for the next 10 minutes to get to her house. The taxi driver says he will wait for me. I grab her keys and after 5 minutes, stupid lock was hard, I get her front door open. I push her in and throw her keys at her and walk away. The whole time she is talking about having sex with me. The cabbie has a good talk on the way home with me. When I get home, I defriend her and all her friends on Facebook. I turn off my phone and go to bed. She calls me the next morning, after I woke up and turned my phone on, like nothing happened, wanting to go to the birthday party. I remind her we are over. She cries, not remembering as usual. She asks if we can at least break up while she is sober, and I say we can talk in a week. One day before we are supposed to meet, she had plans with friends for happy hour. She calls me after asking if we could meet that day instead. When she shows up, she is drunk. I can smell the vodka. After crying and demanding I hold her, she strips naked and tries to rape me. She was small, it wasn't happening, but if she was a guy, she would be in jail. The worst part is I never really said my piece. I never went off and yelled at her. This would bother me until I finally had a random hookup months later. I never got over her, no matter how horrible she was, because I didn't get closure myself. Anyways, tonight I am planning on asking the girl I am dating to be my GF, so things do turn around. She is nothing like the previous girl. Sometimes life sucks, but it does get better. This happened a few months ago. I think it was worth making a Reddit account to share this story with everyone. So, I'm in 3rd year university and I have a job, so it's kind of hard for me to find the time to go on dates. However, recently I downloaded Bumble just to see what kind of activity I would get. After a few weeks on the app, I matched with a girl named Amy, and she started messaging me. Unlike other dating apps, on Bumble, the girl has to make the first move. She was a good-looking girl, we had relatively the same interests, and she even went to the same school as me. We talked for a few weeks, and eventually set up a date. We decided she would come over to my place for dinner. My plan was to impress her with my culinary skills. Yes, I took a few culinary classes. The day arrived, and I heard a knock at my door. I open it, and I breathe a sigh of relief. Amy looked like she did in her pictures. I've always heard stories about how many people don't usually look like they do in their pictures. Amy gives me a hug, and she comes in. She arrived a little bit early, so I still had all my ingredients out with food still frying on the pan. She didn't seem to mind though, as she stood by me as I cooked, and we chatted. At this point, I'm kind of stunned. Amy is beautiful, we have a ton of things in common. We go to the same school, she's smart, funny, a great conversationalist, and she looked exactly like she did in her pictures. She was almost too good to be true. I finally finished preparing the food, and Amy and I sit down and begin to eat and chat. After the meal, we start getting a little flirty with each other. One thing leads to another, and we end up taking things to the bedroom. We begin to kiss, and everything is going normally, until I feel Amy's nails scrape down my back like a wild tiger. I scream and shoot up. "What's wrong?" Amy asked me. "What the hell was that for?" I asked. She apologized and told me she gets carried away sometimes. I took a handheld mirror and looked at my back in the bigger mirror, and it looked like a tiger attacked me. Blood was dripping down my back. I was shocked at this point, but I didn't want this to ruin the night because we had been having such a good time up until this point, and I still wanted to see where our relationship would go. I went into the bathroom to clean out my cuts in the shower. When I came out of the shower, Amy was sitting on my bed smiling at me and apologized again. I looked at how beautiful she was, and I honestly couldn't stay mad at her. We ended up getting back into the groove of things, and we get to the part where it was time for protection. I pulled some condoms out of the dresser. I don't know about you other guys, but before I use a condom, I always inspect it to make sure it's in good condition. The first condom I pulled out had a small hole in the tip. I thought that was weird, but breathed a sigh of relief that I actually checked it before I put it on. I threw that one away and grabbed another one. As I was doing this, Amy was distracting me, almost like she didn't want me checking them. She kept climbing on top of me and trying to get me to hurry up. As I inspected the next condom, I found it also had a small hole in the exact same place the previous one had. At this point, I was very suspicious. I tell Amy to stop, and I dump out all of my condoms and start checking each one, and sure enough, they all had a hole in relatively the same spot. I know for a fact they were all in good condition when I got them, so I knew they were tampered with, and I knew for a fact it was Amy since I live alone, and hadn't had anyone in my bedroom before her. At first, when I confront her about it, she denies everything, but I tell her I'm not stupid and to just tell me the truth. Eventually, as I continue to question her, she tells me, "Okay, fine, I did it, but it's only because every guy I'm with just wants to *CK me, then not call me again. You're a really great guy, and I wanted you to stay with me even after tonight." This made me furious. I said, "Are you *King kidding me, Amy? Do you know how this could have *ked up my life? How can you automatically assume I wouldn't call you? I was liking you up until this point." At this point, I had a girl at my place who gave me a tiger wound and also tried to make me a father without my consent, so I told her to leave. She got dressed and began to walk to the front door. I followed her to make sure she would leave. She did leave, but not before knocking over a few chairs in my kitchen on the way out. After that day, I was much more careful with the girls I met up with on Bumble. I guess the moral of this story is to never take someone at face value. You can never truly know a person based on a brief encounter. Also, men, take care of your condoms. I was in my first real relationship at 26. I was overweight and lacked confidence my entire life, but I had lost weight and found a girl who liked me. We had been dating for almost 6 months. She was hot, but she had issues. For times she had blacked out while drinking and become a total bitch. She was also on antidepressants, which she was bad at taking. She wasn't super affectionate when sober, and she was too reliant on her parents. Oh, and she may have occasionally puked up dinner. This is the story of her 5th blackout. I had already told her if it happened again, we were done, but this one took the cake. It was restaurant week, so we went to dinner at a nice Asian restaurant. It was normal for me to spend way too much money with this girl, but that was another issue. We have a decent dinner and a few drinks. We decide to meet my friends at a bar that is close. Her friend has a birthday party the next afternoon at a bar where there is a drinking contest, so we decide to take the night easy. At the bar my friends are at, there is a special on a 10% beer. The first thing my GF does is order one. I remind her that we have a long day tomorrow, and that it's strong. 15 minutes later she orders another. She is clearly getting drunk. My friends mention the bar they are spending the night at, and she already wants to go. So much for an easy night. Another beer for her. I am getting angry. After telling her to slow down, I go outside to cool off. It's about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. My friends can tell I am getting angry. She orders another beer. She is wasted. My friends decide to help me out and decide they are going to the other bar and we should head home. She demands going with them. She stands up and falls down. I help her with her coat as they leave. While waiting for a cab outside, I tell her that if we don't go home, we are over. She says she doesn't care. We get in our cab. I tell the cabbie her address. She screams that she wants to go to the bar, and the cabbie listens to her. When we arrive at the bar, she stumbles across the street. I motion to the bouncers to not let her in. She also almost bites it while walking. For the first 15 minutes, I try with the bouncers to tell her to go home. Eventually, I just go to the smoking area and talk to random people. I try to call her brother to get him to talk sense into her, but he doesn't answer. Now 45 minutes into this, and still outside, and after multiple attempts by her to run past the bouncers, they literally pick her up and throw her in a cab. I get in and tell him her address. Now you may ask why I have not left yet. Well, if she got in somehow, it was my friend's issue to deal with her, and I didn't want that to happen. Also, I was worried for her safety. At this point, I am 80% breaking up with her. About a mile and a half down the road, she starts screaming that she wants to go back to the bar. I try to calm her down, but the cabbie won't deal with it. We get kicked out. She proceeds to walk in the freezing, weather the mile and a half back to the bar. She almost gets hit by a few cars along the way. When we get to the bar, the bouncers are pissed. I ask if they are calling the cops, to which they shake their heads yes. I ask for 5 minutes and call her mother at 1 a.m. Her mother answers and I explain. She was not shocked, which was odd. Then her mother talks to her and she listens. We get in a taxi and head to her place. I am 90% breaking up with her. On the taxi ride back, she gets pissed I called her mother. At this point, it's worth mentioning I was in a brace due to surgery on my arm. She leans over and starts punching me in the face, a total of 6 times. I am shocked, but finally throw her into the other side of the taxi. She stops. I am 100% breaking up with her. I tell her that we are over for good and there is no coming back. She cries for the next 10 minutes to get to her house. The taxi driver says he will wait for me. I grab her keys and after 5 minutes, stupid lock was hard, I get her front door open. I push her in and throw her keys at her and walk away. The whole time she is talking about having sex with me. The cabbie has a good talk on the way home with me. When I get home, I defriend her and all her friends on Facebook. I turn off my phone and go to bed. She calls me the next morning, after I woke up and turned my phone on, like nothing happened, wanting to go to the birthday party. I remind her we are over. She cries, not remembering as usual. She asks if we can at least break up while she is sober, and I say we can talk in a week. One day before we are supposed to meet, she had plans with friends for happy hour. She calls me after asking if we could meet that day instead. When she shows up, she is drunk. I can smell the vodka. After crying and demanding I hold her, she strips naked and tries to rape me. She was small, it wasn't happening, but if she was a guy, she would be in jail. The worst part is I never really said my piece. I never went off and yelled at her. This would bother me until I finally had a random hookup months later. I never got over her, no matter how horrible she was, because I didn't get closure myself. Anyways, tonight I am planning on asking the girl I am dating to be my GF, so things do turn around. She is nothing like the previous girl. Sometimes life sucks, but it does get better. I've actually got a couple of bad date stories, so this may not be my only post in this sub. 2 years ago, before I met my current partner, I decided to give online dating another go. When single, I go through phases of using apps or setting up profiles, and then a while later I'll do a big purge and swear off them. I just got sick of receiving creepy messages every day. Before my purge though, I started chatting with a guy we'll call S. S and I, from what it seemed, had a lot in common, and the conversation flowed naturally between us. It wasn't awkward at all. It seemed like we could talk to each other. We had a similar sense of humor. Basically, we got along well. We were both quite busy, so it took us nearly 2 months to finally meet up in person. But we had chatted on the phone, and we both knew what the other looked like. We were both very excited about the date, and looking forward to a good meal that night. Everything started out great. He was friendly, and in person everything seemed to flow naturally. He seemed comfortable with me, and I with him. But slowly throughout the night, he let a few things slip, and I saw parts of what I guess were the real him. He was rude to the staff at the restaurant. Like hella rude and impatient. From the guy who showed us where our table was, to the waitress that took our orders, he was rude. Didn't greet them or say hello, no manners, never thanked anyone. Spoke to them like they were stupid. It was awkward for me, so I made sure I was extra nice to the waitress who took care of our table. If she asked basic questions, he answered impatiently. He was kind of demanding. It was uncomfortable for me. She served me first, and for some reason this upset him, because before she could finish speaking with me, he interrupted and said, "What about me?" Props to her for keeping her cool and remaining professional throughout the night, you know. She kept a cool head. She informed him that she would be with him in a minute. He sighed dramatically but waited the extra 20 seconds. When she finished his order, she read everything back to us to clarify and make sure that it was what we wanted. He got all impatient again, and his tone was quite condescending. And yet, when she left to go place our order with the kitchen, he was back to being super nice and chatty. He was really polite with me. He was engaging to talk to and funny. I was confused because it was very much a Jekyll and Hyde type situation. I didn't think much of his initial rudeness to the staff, even though I didn't agree with it. Maybe he was just nervous and thought it would impress me, or maybe he was hangry, I don't know. But that mask slipped again throughout the night when he got up on his high horse about people's jobs and education. To me, a job is a job. I don't know someone's background or story, so who am I to judge? Especially in these times, a job is a job. Gotta make money somehow. He was very judgmental. He made comments to me like, "Oh, they're just waiters." Or "How hard can this be? You'd have to be super dumb to mess up serving people." He was very dismissive of the staff and tried to say that serving people wasn't a real job and that they needed to get a life. This guy was a bit of a Karen. Very rude, entitled, and judgmental. My first ever job was in the customer service/retail industry. Serving people and dealing with members of the public can be mentally draining, but he didn't want to hear it. He wasn't interested in that. But then he would go back to being really nice and we'd have decent conversation. But every now and then he'd make some passing comment that was judgmental and entitled as hell. It was such a turnoff. If he couldn't even be nice to the people serving us our food, how did I know he wouldn't judge other people and their occupations? How did I know he wasn't secretly judging me? The night ended. We went our separate ways. He seemed keen to meet up again and go for another meal, but I couldn't sit through another night of him being a dick to the waitstaff. I slept on it, but then texted him the next day that I didn't think it would work out. I thanked him for the meal and wished him luck with online dating. The response I got was quite entitled. He basically told me that I wasn't his normal type of woman, but he thought he would take a chance on me anyway, and for that, I should be thankful. He implied that I should be so honored he decided to even take me out in the first place. With that final text, the mask had fully slipped, and I realized he was like this all the time. I just replied, bye, and then blocked the number. So, Tinder date, first date went well. He's super nice, chill, cute, a little younger than me, which is usually not my vibe, but whatever. We decide that we would like to engage in sexual intercourse with each other. But I can't host, and he lives with his parents, so obviously he can't host either. He offers to drive us to his dad's home, which is farther away but empty. Great. All sounds good. The minute he picked me up, I was concerned about his driving. Like literally the first red light we pull up to, he starts rolling into the intersection. He's stopping short at stop signs, not signaling. He's just clearly not the best driver. But what boy in their early/mid-20s is, right? I'm a little on edge, but we make it to the house safe. We get inside and says, let's go upstairs. Now I know this is not his home, so I'm expecting a guest room, maybe the master bedroom, even on the couch. Wrong. It turns out this is his childhood home. So upstairs is his childhood bedroom. We're talking twin beds, Mickey Mouse sheets, stickers on the wall. There's a huge poster of Homer Simpson in his underwear, and a holographic picture of Mary Magdalene surrounded by angels. For some odd reason, I am not turned on. We've been in the room barely 5 minutes before he's sitting next to me, kissing me and feeling me up. Okay, cool, let's jump right in. I'll skip the nitty-gritty, but let me just say, pleasing a woman? Not really in his repertoire. We fool around for a few minutes, and then he asks me if I want to be on top or bottom. This could have been a sexy question, but he asked it with the same tone as your hairdresser asking, so how short do you want me to cut it? I was a little taken aback, was like, on top I guess, and off we went. For about 6 minutes. I didn't even know he had finished. So I'm like, oh okay. We chill for a few minutes, keep fooling around, I fake an orgasm, who's surprised. He asks if I want round 2. I do not, but I didn't drive an hour here for 6 minutes. So we go for round 2. We're in and out in about 4 to 5 minutes, because he can't stay hard with the condom after already orgasming once. Okay, cool. So we hang out in bed for a while. He offers me some weed, I accept, and ask him if he's okay to drive me home high. He says, yeah, I do it all the time. I am skeptical, but he seems confident. We get stoned, start shooting the shit, making small talk. What anime are you watching? Did you see this show, etc.? I start spacing out for a few minutes when he asks me, have you ever had problems with depression? I am very taken aback. But I've got nothing to hide, so I say yes, I have and still do. Me too, he says, and tells me that it's a hard thing to deal with. I agree. Great, time for a topic change. Have you ever had any suicidal thoughts? Pause. What? This is a guy I barely know asking me, directly after sex, whether I've had suicidal thoughts. I'm honestly freaked out, but I do have experience with suicide, as a very close family member attempted a few years ago. It was an incredibly hard year for my family, with multiple absolutely horrible things happening in a short period of time. I won't go into it, but we're all much happier and healthier now, and am comfortable talking about it. So I decide to tell him the story, in the hopes of shutting him down a little bit. Because if the question is, do you have experience with suicide, and I say yes, here's this horrible story, the correct response is, oh, that's absolutely horrible, and then you change the subject. Right? Wrong. He wants to know more. He wants details. He starts telling me about his own history with depression, and how he almost committed suicide a few years ago. I am shocked, stoned, and butt-ass naked. What the absolute fuck is going on? I delicately turn the conversation to something else, and bar a few more WTF did you just say? Moments, it's pretty chill. We start the drive home. Do you want the story to end here? Me too. Turns out, he is not good at driving while high. He is slow following the GPS, and when he misses a turn, instead of letting it reroute, tries to make the turn across 2 lanes of traffic. He ran at least 3 red lights, one while making a left-hand turn in the middle of a very busy intersection. When we're a few blocks away from my house, we're stopped at a red light. A lot of the major streets here are one-way, some with multiple lanes of traffic. Aside from having a GPS, this is just A, common knowledge, and B, incredibly obvious, because how can you miss that all the cars are going one way? You know where this is going. So we're chatting, the light turns green, he makes a right-hand turn on the wrong street, into 4 lanes of oncoming, one-way traffic. I am currently shitting my pants. He tries to back up, doesn't work. He tries to make a U-turn in the middle of the street. Obviously, that's incredibly dangerous. I point out a small side street where he can pull in and turn around. He does, we avoid collision, and while I was certainly panicked the rest of the drive, he drops me off without further incidents and makes his own way home. The kicker? He thought it went great and wants to be regular FWB. FML. I see lots of stories where the user has gone onto OkCupid and gotten a very raw deal. Not the story, but I met my husband there, and he's not a psycho. I am here to join those ranks. First off, I didn't join the site myself. My friends decided that after I broke up with my fiancée, I needed a social life. Apparently staying home reading on Friday nights wasn't good for them. They signed me up, gave me the most embarrassing name that I'll get to later, and did kind of a here you go enjoy wasn't my idea bye thing. I was pissed for a while, but then decided to check it out. I started talking to a seemingly normal guy, and pretty soon we were chatting regularly enough for me to be comfortable enough with him to accept a date. He scheduled it, picked me up from my student hall, and away we went. The night started off good. He made me laugh, told a few jokes, and ordered for me. I'm okay with that, if we're dating and have been for long enough that you know what I like, and what I'm allergic to. This guy ordered the most expensive things, yes things, on the menu for us. Then when it came and I found almonds in one of the dishes, I quietly asked the server if he could take it back, as I am allergic to almonds. Senor Douchebag heard and started wailing on the server, calling him names, i.e. stupid, idiotic, incompetent, etc. I told SDB it wasn't that big of a deal, we just met, how was he supposed to know I was allergic? Wrong move. Apparently he took that as a personal attack on him, and started wailing on me, but pulled out the arsenal of female names he had. Cunt, bitch, skank, and I shit you not, he actually called me a dirty pirate hooker. Yeah, I watched that movie. After a few minutes, he calmed down and started acting like everything was okay, while me and the server look at each other like, what? I decided to let it go as a one-time thing, and continued our meal. He gave the server the stink eye every time he came to the table, and eventually started talking about himself, his cars, job, money, parents' society status, money, country club membership. Did I mention he talked about his money? Hear me when I say, I asked about his family, just his family. At this point, I'm sitting there, gazing at the clock on my phone, and nearing the text my roommate, who said she would then call with an emergency point that is very nearly here. I've already caught the server on a bathroom trip, and asked him to put my food in a takeaway carton, and just have it ready, and asked him to call a cab. Then he utters the magic words. SDB dash, so are we gonna fuck or what? Me dash, I'm gonna say no. Before he could recover from anyone daring to deny him his God-given right to fuck, I stand up, get my things, take the carton from the server, and slip him a 20, and get into the waiting cab. For the next few days, SDB called and texted me, sweet at first, but that morphed into snippy asshole comments, again calling me all sorts of nasty not nice names. I laughed about it after a while, and the story became quite popular in my student suite, complete with different voices and accents. It wasn't a month later that I ventured into another OKC date, but this time I got lucky. It was my would-be husband. It was a Friday night, and I was feeling pretty optimistic about this date. His name was Greg, and he seemed like a solid guy. He was really tall, had a great sense of humor, and his profile didn't have any shirtless gym selfies or pictures of him holding a fish. We'd been texting for about a week, and he suggested we meet up for dinner at this cute little Italian restaurant I'd been wanting to try. Oh, how wrong I was. First red flag? Greg was already sitting at the table when I walked in. Now I know what you're thinking. Naomi, isn't that a good thing? Punctuality is attractive. And yes, normally it is. But Greg wasn't just sitting there. He was mid-bite, like full-on forking spaghetti into his mouth before I even got there. I froze for a second, wondering if I was late. I wasn't. 7 p.m. sharp, thank you very much. Or if maybe he'd just been really hungry. Either way, I walked over, smiled, and said, "Hey, Greg." He looked up, his mouth full of pasta, and said, "Oh, hey, you're here," with marinara sauce on his chin. Okay, fine. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he needed a little pre-dinner snack to calm his nerves. I decided to let it slide. Big mistake. I sat down, and before I could even open my menu, Greg was flagging down the waiter. "Hey, buddy, can we get some more breadsticks over here? Oh, and another side of the calamari. Thanks." The waiter nodded, and I just kind of stared at him. Breadsticks? Calamari? Already? I hadn't even picked up my water glass yet. Hungry? I asked, half joking. "Oh yeah," he said casually, wiping his face with a napkin. "I skipped lunch today, so I'm starving." All right, fair enough. I get it. We all get hangry sometimes. But guys, this was just the beginning. When the waiter came back with the breadsticks and calamari, Greg dug in like he was a contestant on a survival reality show. I'm not exaggerating when I say he ate an entire breadstick in 2 bites. 2 bites. I hadn't even reached for one yet, and he was already halfway through the basket. "Do you want some?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the calamari, which was, by the way, rapidly disappearing. Sure," I said, grabbing a piece before it went extinct. I thought maybe he'd slow down once we ordered our main courses. Again, I was wrong. The waiter came back to take our orders, and I went with my go-to, chicken parm. Simple, classic, can't go wrong. Greg, on the other hand, decided to go big. "I'll have the lasagna," he said, "and the fettuccine alfredo. Oh, and can I add a side of meatballs? And maybe a Caesar salad, too." I blinked. Did he just order 4 meals? The waiter hesitated, probably wondering the same thing, but Greg didn't miss a beat. "Oh, and can we get another basket of breadsticks while we wait?" "Thanks, man." At this point, I was starting to wonder if I'd accidentally agreed to have dinner with a competitive eater. While we waited for the food to arrive, Greg continued his assault on the breadsticks. I managed to snag one just in time, but I swear, it felt like I was fighting for survival. Meanwhile, he was chatting away like nothing was out of the ordinary. He told me about his job, something in sales, I think. It was hard to focus while he was double-dipping calamari in marinara sauce, his workout routine, clearly ineffective given the calorie intake, and his dog Max, who, by the way, eats like a little garbage disposal. The irony was not lost on me. When the main courses arrived, I thought, okay, surely he'll slow down now. Spoiler, he did not slow down. In fact, I think he sped up. Watching Greg eat was like watching a tornado tear through a small town. He attacked the lasagna first, barely pausing to chew before moving on to the fettuccine. The Caesar salad sat untouched on the side, like it had been invited to the table as a cruel joke. Meanwhile, I was trying to enjoy my chicken parm, but it was hard to focus with Greg shoveling food into his mouth like he was on a timer. At one point, he actually said, "Oh man, this Alfredo is so good. You gotta try it," and tried to fork feed me a bite. I panicked and leaned back like he was holding out a live snake. "I'm good, thanks." By the time he finished his lasagna, fettuccine, and side of meatballs, I was still halfway through my meal. I figured he'd slow down now, maybe sip some water, and let the food settle. But no. Greg leaned back in his chair, rubbed his stomach, and said, "Man, that was great. You think they have dessert here?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. He was not joking. The waiter came by, and Greg immediately asked for the dessert menu. Not wanting to be rude, I decided to order something small, a scoop of gelato maybe. But Greg went all in on the tiramisu. Not just a slice, the whole tray. I wish I could say the tiramisu was the end of it, but no. Greg demolished that thing like it owed him money. The table next to us actually stopped their conversation to watch him. I could see the waiter in the corner, whispering to another staff member and pointing at our table. I wanted to crawl under the booth and disappear. When he finally finished, Greg leaned back again, let out a satisfied sigh, and said, "Man, that was amazing. I could eat here every day." Of course you could, Greg. The bill came, and to his credit, Greg did offer to pay for everything. I felt bad letting him foot the bill for what was essentially an all-you-can-eat buffet, but he insisted. "I eat a lot," he said with a shrug, as if that wasn't painfully obvious. As we walked out of the restaurant, I was half expecting him to suggest hitting up a burger joint for round 2. Instead, he patted his stomach and said, "That was fun. We should do it again sometime." I smiled weakly, still trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Yeah, maybe. Spoiler, there was no second date. So there you have it. My date with the human vacuum cleaner. Moral of the story? If a guy starts eating before you even arrive, run. Don't walk. Run. And maybe keep an emergency breadstick in your purse, just in case. You never know when you'll need it. I had a date with a girl. I believe it was Tinder though. And our first date was me inviting her to friends' NYE party. This was several years ago. She shows up to my house already pretty drunk. We had a few drinks at my house before heading over to my friend's party. This girl proceeds to get unbelievably drunk and ends up getting kicked out of the party. However, she refuses to leave without me and claims that her purse is at my house. I order this girl an Uber, but she refuses to get in without me. So I do as she is drunkenly demanding, screaming, crying, yelling, everything. It was embarrassing. We go back to my house, and turns out her purse wasn't there at all. It's actually in her car. I ask her to leave, because this has already been a horrible date. She initially refuses, because now it turns out that she left her jacket at my friend's house. We go back and forth for some time. I continue to offer an Uber to her house. Then she starts telling me that I robbed her because I stole her jacket, and then I am now holding her prisoner here. She then says she wants her father to pick her up, which great, as long as you leave. I start straightening up my house while she calls her father. As I'm cleaning up the table, I notice that she is standing in the corner of kitchen and see her suddenly reach for a knife, and she brings it to her wrist. I sprint for her and wrestle the knife out of her hand. She is crying hysterically. I am able to get a hold of my phone and call 911. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher until the cops showed up to my house about 5 minutes later. 5 officers showed up, weapons drawn. I pushed myself off of her and got my hands up immediately. At this point I'm scared shitless and thinking I'm going to jail for this fucked up Tinder date. She ends up telling the police that I'm a great guy and didn't do anything wrong. She gets hauled off in an ambulance. This was the worst date I've ever had. The icing on the cake is the following day her father comes to my house to pick up his car. He gives me a $50 gift card to a local bar and says, "Sorry for your trouble. She's off of her medication and has been having issues." Matched with a gorgeous woman, and we got to chatting straight away. We had great convo and no trouble genuinely making each other laugh. She was very responsive and seemed super interested, so was I. So unsurprisingly, plans for a date quickly ensued. So far so good. This was just after the last round of lockdowns had ended where I live. You needed to book just about everywhere, and places were being strict about charging for canceled bookings and allotting 2-hour table time limits. Took the risk and booked for drinks. I show up on time, waiter takes me to the table. I order a drink and chill thinking she's going to be a little late based on the last TXT exchange. 15 minutes and I get a text saying she's struggling to find parking. "Not a problem, no stress, see you when you get here," I respond. 15 minutes later the follow-up, "I'm just around the corner, TXT lands." At this stage I've finished the drink I ordered, and the waiter keeps coming round reminding me I've got limited time on the booking, and asking if I want another drink or to order food. I turn down the drink, not wanting to be half-cut, when slash if my date shows, and don't order food either. Waiter looks very annoyed. I'm thinking about settling the bill and getting on my merry way. 15 minutes later, a total of 45 minutes late, date finally shows. I'm annoyed, but she walks in looking smoking hot, looking even better than her very attractive pics, and apologizes profusely, which lowers the irritation to a simmer that is quickly forgotten. She did make a remark about how she had to take time to get pretty for me. That kinda irked me, but again smoking hot, and besides that quip actually quite charming, so I let it slide. My date orders a cocktail, I get a beer, and she downs the thing before I've gotten a quarter of the way through my beer, and immediately orders another one, and slams that one down before I can finish my beer. Remember, she drove to this date. Waiter does his time, keep thing looking even more annoyed, and we collectively realize not enough time to eat, so I settle the bill, and my date, and I decide to go elsewhere. At this point, I'm pretty much sober, but I can see Slam 'em down Cocktail Sue is in no state to drive. Turns out she parked her car about a block away, which begs the question why it took her so long to get there if she was parked around the CNR. But Waitev's issue now is she can't drive, and will 100% get a ticket if she leaves her car where it is. I'm a little amused at her plight, but I offer a solution. Find a long-term park for the car, then it won't an issue for the evening. She agrees this is sensible, but she's definitely over the limit, so I drive her car into an overnight-type parking lot with a reasonable weekend rate and think crisis averted. Little did I know what would follow. We kick on to a few other spots around town, and by this point the city is heaving, and we're progressively both getting drunker and drunker, but having an absolute blast. End up at club-type spot dancing, getting handsy and lip-locking with each other. Never had a first date quite so raucous, but this woman is hilarious and good times are being had by all. Then things suddenly turn. She takes a phone call, her face visibly darkens, and she's absolutely seething. Apparently it's someone she did a favor for that turned on her, and she says, "I can be the sweetest, kindest person in the world, but if you cross me I'll destroy you, flushed face." We're both quite drunk, but I can see this line of talk ain't leading to anything good, so I try to change the subject to no avail. She's ranting and getting more and more worked up. People start to stare, and I hold her hand and gently try to calm her down. She flips the script and yells, "Don't fucking touch me." Mind you, we'd been a hell of a lot more intimate already by then than hand-holding, so I'm completely thrown. Time freezes as literally everyone turns to look at what must look like an abusive spouse me. Thankfully, she spots the look of shock/horror on my face, quickly grabs my hand, apologizes, and tries to snuggle into me. I'm deafened by the alarm bells ringing in my head, and all I can think about is how to pull the pin on this date ASAP. I say I'm leaving, get up, walk out. She chases after me. She's now beside herself, emotional, and I say we're clearly both way too drunk, and we should end the date. I offer to pay for her Uber home, and she mutters something about getting a hotel room for the night, as she needs her car first thing in the morn. I tell her that that's a good idea, but that I won't be joining her in the hotel room. I'm going home, thanks very much. She then flies into a rage and demands I help her get her car from parking garage because she's too drunk to do it. I'm like, lady, I'm just as drunk as you. No goddamn way I'm getting behind the wheel of anything right now. Besides, you don't need your car if you Uber home or get a hotel room. She calls me every name in the book, and I walk away calling Uber go home, laughing to myself about my date with Satan's little helper. I receive a barrage of abusive TXTs and attempts at emotional blackmail. How can you just leave me like this, which I ignore. Get home, turn my phone off, and crash. Next morning I wake up to a video message from her. She went and got her car and drove it home, y'all. The recording was her gunning it down the highway while filming and taunting me. "Sweet baby Jesus, what is wrong with you?" was all I could reply. About 6 hours later, she's blowing up my phone apologizing, saying how she's embarrassed and ashamed, got too drunk, and isn't normally like this. I tell her she's playing with fire with what she did, and that she could have in a moment destroyed her life or worse, someone else's, with her craziness. She agrees. I stop talking to her. Really hope she got help. But yeah, this is the craziest date I've ever been on. I finally decided to start dating again, so I decided to make a Facebook dating profile. I matched not too long after with this guy. We had planned to meet the next night. Before I went on the date, I showed my sister a picture of him, and she said that he used to play bass in my dad's church, something I didn't remember. It was the night of the date, and he was texting me over using the words babe and baby. I thought it was weird but didn't want to judge him too quickly, but should have canceled once he said, "Okay, let me shower and get all handsome. You can come over and wait while I showered." But I didn't. I told him no, and I would meet him at the restaurant. I show up, and things to be going smoothly. I tell him how we have met before, and he gets all excited, and said he had a crush on me back then. Mind you, I was 12, and he was 21. We walked on the sundial, and he kept asking me to be his girlfriend. I said no because I didn't want to rush into anything, and wanted to get to know him first. He kept asking and was telling me all the nice things he would do for me, but I still said no. The next day he invited me over to his apartment, and while we were there he was saying how nice guys always finish last, and kept asking me to promise that I won't leave him for a bad boy, or hurt him. I thought this was weird because we weren't even dating. Then he said the L word after only talking for 2 days. He said he loved me and asked if I love him back. I said no, and he proceeded to say, "I think you do. I think you're just afraid to say it." He even said that he's going to get condoms so he can make love to his baby. This gave me bad vibes, so I found an excuse to leave. When I got home, he kept saying how much he missed me even though it had just been an hour after I left. The next morning he kept texting me, and I just gave one-word answers or not answering at all. He got the message and said something about how it was awkward between us, so I told him how he's moving to fast and how you can't fall in love with someone in 2 days. He finally left me alone, but that was one of the worst dates that I've been on. Great first date. We had so much in common. We loved musicals and could quote little-known lines from old shows, and he was also adopted by his aunt and her wife, like myself. I was super excited for the second date. It was an insanely snowy and cold evening, and I broke college but could not afford to replace my bald tires, so I had him pick me up at my place. I trusted him after all. We connected on so many levels. He took me to the local hole-in-the-wall bar, but when we went to order food we found out the kitchen was closed. He offered to make me chicken mole SP at his place. I was intrigued and have always liked watching guys cook for me. He drove me to his place, and we had a couple drinks while he cooked me an amazing meal. We started making out on the couch after dinner, and his demeanor changed. He seemed to be getting anxious, and when I pulled away to go to the restroom, something triggered in him. I came back from my potty break to find him talking to someone. My view of the room was obscured from the hallway, so I thought he had a roommate or something that just came home. When he noticed me, he stopped and seemed a little jarred. I entered the living room and turned to the corner of the room his discussion was centered, preparing myself to make a good first impression, and no one was there. Side note, this is not super weird to me. I practice conversations out loud, relive clever past conversations I have had, and even passively act out scenes from my favorite movies and TV shows. Face masks have been a blessing, because I haven't been called out on my incessant, outwardly expressed inner dialogue in a year and a half. I sat back down with him on the couch and did not acknowledge the incident. He was still anxious, so I began stroking his hair and told him how handsome I thought he was. I assumed he was having a crisis of confidence, so I verbally tried to remedy that. We slowly started making out again, and we reclined along the couch with him on top of me. He abruptly stopped after a few minutes and lifted off of me halfway, so I opened my eyes and saw him looking over in the corner of the room. I propped myself up and looked over, but nothing was there. I tried to guide him back down, but he resisted and said, "I don't want to do this in front of her." "In front of who?" I asked. "That little girl," he said. I do not remember most of what he said because I was starting to get freaked out, but he began arguing with this invisible little girl in the corner of the room. I just watched and listened as he got up and talked about me like I wasn't there. He spoke to her like he knew her, so I knew this wasn't a one-time occurrence. This went on for 5 minutes before he said the thing that I will remember forever. "I can't do it. She wasn't supposed to be this pretty and smart." At that moment, I just knew that I was about to be murdered. I started to get off the couch and grab my jacket. He then redirected his attention to me and told me not to leave. He grabbed my arm and pulled me down to the couch and would not let me get back up. "Is this because I have a small penis?" he said. "My penis is perfectly normal, and I think it is really disgusting that women are so obsessed with size. They always want assholes with donkey dicks." I replied, "I would have no way to know what size your penis is. I want to leave because you are making me feel unsafe, and I suspect that you are dealing with some mental health issue right now. Can you please take me home?" At this point, I am trying to decide if I would freeze to death walking the 4 miles back to my apartment, and my conclusion was that it was a possibility. I needed to get out of this house, and maybe knock on doors or something and get help. Keep in mind, back then Uber wasn't a thing. I had to change my game plan. I had to survive this. I started talking to the imaginary girl, and continued the conversational three-way for 45 minutes because my date kept blocking the exits when I would get close. I told her things like, I was sorry that I was making out with hashtag. I know he is your friend, and you don't want to see us being that friendly. I like him a lot too, and I do want to be with him. I'm just really tired, and maybe I can come back tomorrow, and we can all go to the park together. You look like you are getting really tired too, sweetheart. In reality, I was trying to calm my troubled date and make him feel like I wasn't going to ghost him. I talked about how I thought he was one, and that I wanted to wait to have romantic relations because he was so special. Finally, he offered to take me home, and he did so, with the emergency brake engaged the entire journey. When his yellow Mustang pulled up to my apartment, I instantly regretted that he knew where I lived. I kept the act up and kissed him sweetly, and told him to text me tomorrow. I walked into my door and tightly shut the door, turning the lock and sliding the chain. The ordeal was over, or so I thought. I wake up to a loud banging about 3 hours later. I open the door, leaving the chain hooked. Guess who it is? My date proceeded to accuse me of stealing his debit card. He told me he didn't care, but he needed it back. I told him I didn't have it, but he continued to get louder until 2 men from across the hall opened their door. A few days later, dude texted me and told me he found his debit card. He apologized for getting tipsy the other night. About 3 years later, dude contacts me on OKC. He did not recognize me. I told him that we had gone on a couple dates and explained what happened. To which he said, "Sorry that happened, but are you sure that was me?" My recent date was a nightmare. Literal nightmare. Maybe sharing this will help me exorcise the memory of one of the most uncomfortable, mortifying dates I've ever been on. Let's talk about Matt, the guy who decided that our first date was the perfect time to turn me into his unpaid, unwilling therapist. It started off good as you would expect. Matt and I had matched on Tinder. Conversation flowed, and things were looking good. I was cautious because of my history on dating apps like Tinder, Hinge, etc. We texted for about a week, and he asked me out for coffee. Simple, low pressure, and honestly, I was just grateful it wasn't another guy suggesting we hang out at his place while he figures how to make a move on me. So I agreed and we met up. The coffee shop was cute. One of those hipster spots with exposed brick, overpriced lattes, and employees who look like they write poetry in their spare time. I got there a few minutes early, grabbed a table by the window, and waited. Matt showed up on time, which was nice. He looked like his photos, which was also nice. He smiled, said hi, and ordered a black coffee. Everything seemed good. It was fine. But then we sat down, and he started talking. "So," Matt said, barely 5 minutes into the date, "I just want to be upfront. I'm coming out of a tough breakup." Now look, I get it. We all have baggage. You don't hit a certain age without at least a couple of emotional bruises. But there's a way to share that without making it weird. Something like, "Yeah, my last relationship didn't work out, but I'm excited to start fresh." You know, normal human stuff. But Matt did not do that. "Oh," I said, trying to sound polite. "That's understandable. Breakups can be rough." He nodded, leaning back in his chair like he was about to drop some deep, philosophical insight. "Yeah, she was crazy. Like, legitimately crazy. I mean, I probably didn't help. I can be kind of intense, but she just couldn't handle it." Cue the first red flag. Actually, no. Cue the first parade of red flags. Anytime someone describes their ex as crazy, it's a warning sign. But I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just nervous. Maybe he didn't realize how bad that sounded. Spoiler, he knew exactly what he was doing. "She was always so dramatic," Matt continued, completely ignoring my attempt to change the subject by asking about his job. "Like one time, she got mad at me for yelling at her in public. I wasn't even yelling. I was just frustrated. But she made such a big deal about it. Women are so emotional, you know." I stared at him, my coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth. Did he really just say that? Did he really just call women emotional while recounting how he yelled at his ex in public? I didn't even know how to respond. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction again. "So, what kind of music do you like?" But Matt wasn't done. "I mean, don't get me wrong," he said, completely ignoring my question. "I wasn't perfect either. Like, yeah, I yelled sometimes. And maybe I threw a chair once. But I never hit her or anything, so it's not like I was abusive." I was speechless. "What do you even say to that?" "Oh, cool, thanks for not hitting her." "Wow, you sound like a catch?" I wanted to grab my bag and walk out right then and there, but I was so stunned I just sat there, blinking at him like a malfunctioning robot. "She just couldn't handle my honesty," Matt continued, as if he hadn't just admitted to throwing furniture. "Like one time, I told her she wasn't good at her job, and she got all upset. I wasn't trying to be mean, I was just being real. But women don't want honesty. They just want you to tell them what they want to hear." At this point, I was gripping my coffee cup so tightly I thought it might shatter in my hands. It was like I was trapped in some kind of bizarre social experiment, designed to see how much nonsense I could tolerate before snapping. But the thing is, Matt wasn't done. Oh no, he was just getting warmed up. "She was always talking about how toxic I was," he said, using air quotes like that somehow made it less horrifying. "But I wasn't toxic. She just couldn't handle a real man. All her friends were on her side, of course, because that's what women do. They gang up on you. It's like, can't we all just move on and be adults?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man had turned our first date into a therapy session about how he was the victim in his clearly disastrous relationship. I wanted to ask him why he thought it was a good idea to bring all this up on a first date, but honestly, I was afraid of the answer. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "So," I said, interrupting him mid-rant, "do you always talk about your ex this much?" He blinked at me, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. I just think it's important to be honest. I don't want to waste anyone's time. Oh, don't worry, Matt, I thought. You've already wasted plenty of my time. I smiled and glanced at my phone. Oh wow, look at the time, I said, pretending to read a text. I have to go. Early meeting tomorrow. He looked confused but didn't argue. Oh, okay. Well, it was nice meeting you. We should do this again sometime. Yeah, I said, already halfway out the door. Spoiler, we did not do this again. Hello, this is my first time posting to Reddit, and hopefully you find my story interesting to say the least. To start, I will give some background. So this all happened about a year ago. I was working at my previous job for an assisted living/memory care facility. For those who don't know what this is, it is a care facility almost like a retirement home but smaller, and we care for those people who can't take care of themselves, like a big apartment building with each person/couple getting a room. We were one of the facilities that wasn't shut down cause of the virus, but turned away family visits since we didn't know where people have been visiting. People could have gone in and out of homes or public places where the virus was brewing. I am a young 21-year-old woman who is Hispanic and on the bigger side, and I live at home with my mom since it's cheaper to pay rent to her than any apartment. Comes into play later on. I am in no way a B*********H, but can become really mad if something/someone ticks me off too much. Anyways, back to the story. I just met our new dishwasher, and he was a bit awkward. To be clear, he was a 30-year-old, mentally disabled, and still lives at home with his parents' person, not the first mentally disabled person working in my department. I decided to befriend him since I befriended everyone, and I am a very nice person. I get to know him for a couple of months, and I heard that everyone wanted him to ask me out. Normally, I wouldn't go out with someone who is older than me by a significant age gap. I have no ill will against people who are mentally disabled, since one of my good friends is mentally disabled, and went out on a date that didn't go well with her brother, who is also mentally disabled. Can post about that experience as well if this one is a hit. He eventually asked me out, and I reluctantly said yes because I was just trying to be a friend and a good person. We went out, and it wasn't bad, and we dated 2 other times. Don't really like the word date, as that indicates that we liked each other. Hang out is more the word I would use. I told him in a text that I didn't feel that we shouldn't be together, and I broke it off before anything went any further. He seemed hurt but understood this. This will be important later on, and how I was the one who didn't reciprocate his feelings. This would have worked except the fact that he was, how do I say this, kind of stalking me by sending me 15 texts right in a row without me even responding. I would get up in the morning and see all the texts that he sent me. I told him to back off, and he said okay but didn't get it. I kept getting texts from him, so I blocked him for a while. Then things went good, so I unblocked him since things were going good. Over the course of a few months, oh how was I wrong, and he went back to his old ways by texting me actually more and more frequently. I pulled him aside during work one day and told him that he can't text me so often. I also knew that he liked me because he kept giving me free lottery tickets between $10 to $30 plus gift cards and a tote bag. I told him that I didn't feel the same way that he felt to me and felt uncomfortable, and I think he got the idea and backed off. After 2 months, he went on vacation, and I blocked him during his trip to make sure I don't get 40 plus texts from him during his vacation. Everything went awesome, but once he came back, he kept trying to get close to me by asking if I wanted to get together and hang out/date again, but I brushed him off. I found out that he told people at our work that we were dating even though we weren't, and I told him in front of everyone to make sure that he got it through his head that we were not dating. I eventually quit about 2 months ago, and everything was going good except that I got an iPad recently and transferred all my contacts into it. I got a text from what I can only expect to be him, and he was wondering if he did anything to upset me and hoped we can be friends. How many times can I say how much of a creep he was and how I haven't talked to him in person since I left my job? I am so glad that I am not going to see that creep every day when I went to work anymore, and I'm not going to be friends with him. The only thing is that he has my main email, so that's a problem. It's such a good thing that I never asked him to pick me up for any time I dated/hung out with him. I just didn't feel comfortable with him being either in my car or his car. I never actually told him that he creeps me out, but it was better that we left our friendship how it was. I feel sort of bad that he just didn't get it, but hopefully he finds someone who actually loves him and not just empty words. I also kept all the gift cards, and the tote will be used or sold cause who wouldn't. Hopefully no one that you are or may date is like this, and if they are, please take my advice and block that person so this doesn't happen to you. I have many stories about my old workplace and the work story from the previous workplace. If this story gets good feedback, I will post about them. Went out on a blind date arranged by a mutual friend. We had a lot in common, so it felt promising. The friend was really sure we'd be great friends, even if it wasn't romantic. She said the guy was an amazing single dad, who had been on his own with his sons since his ex left a couple of years ago. I'd just finalized my divorce, and it was my first date in years. We went to a cute restaurant, and he was really polite at first. We ordered, and everything was fine. He had a glass of wine that he chugged, which should have tipped me off. When I mentioned that his younger son was around my daughter's age, everything changed. He said he was a loser due to his failed marriage, his ex not even seeing the kids because he'd picked a crazy person to marry, being a single dad, and not finishing college. This came out of nowhere. He then ranted loudly, through dinner about his dead-end job, medical his dues, needing his dad and stepmom to live with him, and now needing to be set up with a friend who felt sorry for him. I pointed out that our friend said great things about him. He then went off about how the friend wouldn't date him because he was a loser. In the few moments he let me speak, I tried to bring up all the nice things I'd heard about him. He said our friend was an idiot and that she would never go out with him. I finally asked if he'd ever asked her out, which he hadn't, nor had he ever told her he had feelings for her. He said he was such a loser that he knew she'd say no. Clearly, he wanted to be with her. He was tearing up when he talked about how she was such a good person, but also too stupid to realize he would be good to her. He was obviously drunk or something, but he'd only had 2 glasses of wine at this point. Right after he started getting teary, the waiter came by. I tried to pass on dessert to escape, but he told her I definitely needed dessert, and he needed water and coffee. I stupidly thought that was a weird apology, and looked at the menu. He then told the server that I looked like the kind of woman who ate 2 or 3 desserts. I stared at him in embarrassment, but he said I wasn't that fat, but I clearly liked dessert. I was mortified and said it was time to go. I refused to let him pay because I had cash and wanted to leave immediately. I was shaking with embarrassment and didn't say anything. I just got in my car and left. I called my friend when I got home. She was genuinely surprised and seemed shocked by his behavior and that the guy was interested in her. While we were talking, the guy called her. He told her he'd been drinking in the parking lot before our date to stay calm. Apparently, after I left, he sat in his car, drinking more and calling around for a ride home. His dad picked him up and was yelling at the guy to hang up and get in the car. The guy saw me in a coffee shop a few months later. He smiled, stopped to say hi, remembered my name, and acted like nothing had happened.